But first, the real conflict bubbling up. That's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, tonight, whatever is left of the Iranian regime and the IRG remains defiant. But thankfully, they're not always accurate. As I just mentioned, one of their suspected drones hit a parking lot next to an empty U.S. consulate in Abu Dhabi. And today, the president and his cabinet worked to reassure the public that Operation Epic Fury is going according to plan.
They have no Navy. It's been knocked out. They have no Air Force. It's been knocked out. They have no air detection. That's been knocked out. Their radar has been knocked out. And just about everything's been knocked out.
Our objectives remain as they've been identified from the beginning. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and we will now not allow Iran to hide behind the immunity of a massive short-term ballistic missile inventory. CENTCOM, in a joint operations, is carrying out a systematic destruction of their missile belt, destruction of their launchers, and destruction of their ability to make these, as well as the destruction of their Navy.
Meanwhile, we're learning more about why Iran has broadened the battlefield to hit prominent Gulf neighbors. And what is becoming a major test of wills. The Iranians believe that by inflicting maximum economic pain on the region and on the United States, well, the Gulf nations will soon pressure President Trump to declare victory and just head home. Now, 20% of all oil traffic worldwide travels through the Strait of Hormuz, so disrupting that creates global shockwaves. We've seen it already, and we're already feeling the pinch here at home.
What we've seen today alone is the national average for gas prices, $3.11. That is up 12 cents since yesterday. That is the steepest rise since March of 2022. And now gas prices today are higher than they were a year ago.
Yeah, well, he's not going to like that, President Trump. But the president, look, he knows that the price fluctuations are temporary. So their message to the Iranians is this: we determine the timetable, not you, and you ain't seen nothing yet.
You're going to really begin to perceive a change in the scope and in the intensity of these attacks as, frankly, the two most powerful air forces in the world take apart this terroristic regime and defang it and take away its ability to threaten its neighbors.
And Rubio took some incoming of his own today. The press and Democrats seized on comments he made yesterday about what precipitated the strikes last Saturday.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
So he says that, and then the instant narrative on the left and among some on the right became, you see, it is Israel's war, not ours.
Did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready, and we were ready.
Now, clearly, the president saw an opportunity. He assessed the very real risks. He did a cost-benefit analysis, and then he decided to take preemptive action. Of course, the incoming that Rubio was taking on this, it's to be expected. They needed to clarify this.
Your quote is about, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack.
Yeah, no, I understand. But listen, all right, let me understand. But let me answer, because this is my press conference. If you tell the President of the United States that if we don't go first, we're going to have more people killed and more people injured, the President's going to go first. That's what he did. That's what the President will always do. They are hiding behind these missiles and hiding behind these drones. They wanted to reach a point where you couldn't touch them, and then they could do whatever the hell they wanted with their nuclear program. And there is no way in the world that this terroristic regime was going to get nuclear weapons, not under Donald Trump's watch.
Now, when you listen to the entire exchange of Rubio's yesterday, a fair person heard that President Trump was willing to put his entire presidency on the line for our security, even if the nuclear threat was not imminent, and even if he was going to get just scorched from a lot of critics back home. But apparently, for the media, none of that was good enough.
Why did it have to happen this weekend?
this weekend presented a unique opportunity to take joint action against this threat. And we wanted this to have maximum success. We want this operation to be successful at achieving its objectives.
Will the U.S. attack about no matter what Israel is planning to do?
The president acted on the timing that gave us the highest chance of success. And that's what you're seeing play out right now. You're seeing it play out right now, and you'll see it in the days to come. We will systematically take apart their missile program. We will destroy their ability to sponsor terrorism, by the way. We will destroy their factories. We will destroy their Navy. Those objectives are going to be met. We're well on our way to meeting them. It will not be easy. There will be a price to pay for it, but that is a much lower price to pay than having a nuclear-armed Iran.
Now, we're also beginning to learn more about what went inside those U.S.-Iranian negotiations that broke down over the issue of nuclear enrichment.
Both the Iranian negotiators said to us directly, with no shame, that they controlled 460 kilograms of 60%, and they're aware that that could make 11 nuclear bombs, and that was the beginning of their negotiating stance.
They sound about as reasonable as Hakeem Jeffries, who shows us what he really cares about in his comments. And unlike with Trump, it's not the safety of the American people. Because even with heightened threats to the homeland now, Jeffries refuses to vote to fully fund the DHS, and then he flat out lies.
Donald Trump launches an unauthorized war in the Middle East. He characterizes it as endless, and then wants to use his unauthorized war as an excuse to continue spending taxpayer dollars to brutalize or kill American citizens by continuing to unleash ICE. The whole thing is insane. Make it make sense, because it does not.
Just a complete fraud. I'm sorry. The real debate here, and you saw it in his comments, is not between the interventionists and the isolationists, or even between Trump and some elements of his base. The real debate, the real conflict here is between those who believe America is good and those who believe fundamentally America is corrupt and evil. Because if you believe the latter, like sadly most Democrats, the media, the academia do, you believe that the U.S. may not use its military unless we are advancing international interests and internationally approved. But if you believe America is special, that she's worth saving, you believe that our military exists to keep the American people safe and our interests abroad secure, even if the world will criticize us down the road.
Let me explain to you guys this in simple English, okay? Iran is run by lunatics, religious fanatic lunatics. They have an ambition to have nuclear weapons. They intend to develop those nuclear weapons behind a program of missiles and drones and terrorism that the world will not be able to touch them for fear of those things. The world will be a safer place when these radical clerics no longer have access to these weapons.
Oh, and by the way, just hours ago, the NATO Secretary General told us not to believe the headlines that the entire world is against the U.S. here.
I was on the phone with many leaders over the weekend and also early this week, and I clearly sensed that taking out nuclear capability, taking out the ballistic missile capability, and also Khamenei gun, this is applauded by many of my colleagues in NATO.
The NATO secretary's comments confirm that America and the West are safer because Trump decided to order military action when he did. Now, Trump's opponents here, you have to understand this. It's really important that you get this. They are not angry because they have a better solution. They were happy just to kick this down the road for future generations to deal with. They're angry because they do not want America under Donald Trump to succeed. Heck, they're still angry at the U.S. men's Olympic hockey team, for goodness sakes. Good faith debates about military intervention, that's one thing. But when you are hoping for American failure to save political face, you're just pathetic. And that's The Angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.